He needed a wedding. She needed money. A contract was signed, a simple agreement, no feelings, no complications. But what happens when the lie starts to seem too real? Marcus had always believed that love was a distraction, a mistake that only led to disappointment. Lucia has always dreamed of something real, but has learned to survive without expectations. When their worlds collide, everything that seemed controlled begins to go off track. A touch that lasts a second too long. A look that reveals more than it should. The line between contract and truth begins to disappear. Now, one question remains. What happens when a marriage of convenience becomes anything but a farce? The contract lay on the table, each printed word carrying an invisible weight. Marcus stared expressionlessly at the paperwork, his fingers drumming against the polished wood. "Are you sure about this?" asked Daniel, his lawyer and longtime friend. Marcus looked up. "I have no choice. If I want to secure my position in the company, I need to be married before the board meeting." Daniel sighed, crossing his arms. "This is insane. Why don't you find someone with whom you have, I don't know, a real relationship?" Marcus laughed humorlessly. "Love has no place in business. It's just a contract." Daniel shook his head and pointed to the other end of the table, where a woman sat quietly watching the scene with attentive eyes. Lucia. She seemed out of place in that luxurious office. Her hands rested on her lap, clutching her handbag tightly. Her eyes moved from the contract to Marcus, then to Daniel. "Have you read everything?" Marcus asked, addressing her for the first time. Lucia nodded slowly. "Yes." She took a deep breath. "I still find it surreal that someone would pay to get married." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "You need money. I need a wedding. I don't see the problem." Lucia bit her lip thoughtfully. "And how long will that last?" "A year. Then we'll get divorced and you can get on with your life with a nice sum in your bank account." Daniel snorted. "What about the confidentiality clause?" Marcus crossed his fingers on the table. "No one can know that our marriage is fake. My partners, my family, the press. To the world, we'll be a couple in love." Lucia swallowed. "And what happens if I break this rule?" "The contract dissolves and you get nothing." She took a deep breath. "It sounds simple." Lucia looked at him for a few seconds before picking up the pen. Marcus watched as she signed the paper, each stroke of ink sealing an agreement that would change their lives forever. When she had finished, she put down the pen and looked at him. "So, we're married?" Marcus took the contract and signed his own part without hesitation. "Not officially, but we will be soon." Lucia nodded, still looking uncertain. "What happens now?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, analyzing her. "Now you have to learn to be my wife." The white dress hanging on the door looked like something from another world to Lucia. The fabric was fine and sophisticated, completely different from the simple clothes she used to wear. She reached up and ran her fingertips over the fabric. It still seemed unreal. "Are you ready?" Marcus's voice made her spin on her heels. He was standing in the doorway, impeccable in a dark suit, but with an expression that was hard to decipher. Lucia let out a nervous laugh. "I still don't know how anyone could be ready for something like this." Marcus crossed his arms. "It's just a wedding. We sign the papers, smile for the photos, and that's it." She arched an eyebrow. "That's it?" He shrugged. "What else did you expect?" Lucia looked at the dress once more before answering. "I guess nothing. But it's strange to get married without emotion." Marcus let out a sigh, leaning against the wall. "You knew what you were getting into when you signed the contract. There's no room for sentimentality in this." Lucia nodded slowly. "Of course there is. No sentimentality." Marcus watched her for a moment before speaking again. "The driver will be waiting for us in an hour. Don't be late." He left without waiting for a reply, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Lucia turned back to her dress and let out a long sigh. A wedding without love. It's like a fairy tale in reverse. An hour later, Lucia was walking down the stairs of the luxurious building where Marcus now lived, and where she would live too. He was waiting for her beside the sleek black car, checking the watch on his wrist. When he raised his head and saw her, he went still for a moment. Lucia noticed his gaze roaming up and down her, but Marcus quickly regained his composure. "That's acceptable," he said, opening the car door for her. "What a gentleman," Lucia replied wryly, getting into the vehicle. The drive to the registry office was silent, only the sound of tires on the road filling the tense atmosphere between them. When they arrived, a photographer was already waiting for them, along with Daniel, who would be the only witness. "We don't have much time," Daniel warned. "Let's sign and take the photos." Marcus took Lucia's hand without warning and entwined his fingers with hers. She was startled by the unexpected touch. "What are you doing?" He leaned over to whisper in her ear. "Remember, this has to feel real." Lucia felt her heart race. But it was just a piece of paper, just a contract. So why did her chest feel so tight? The pen slid across the paper with a soft sound, officially sealing the deal between them. Marcus and Lucia were married, at least on paper. The photographer clicked non-stop, recording every detail so that everything looked genuine. Lucia tried to smile, but the feeling that it was all surreal bothered her. Marcus turned to her, and before she could react, held her face firmly and sealed his lips to hers. It was quick, precise, without emotion, just a calculated gesture for the camera. When he pulled away, she whispered between her teeth, "Try to look less tense." Lucia felt her face burn, but she forced a smile. "How romantic! I can almost feel the passion." Marcus didn't reply. He just took her hand and led her out of the registry office where the car was waiting for them. On the way back, Lucia kept her eyes fixed on the window, watching the city go by. "What now?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Now we start the real act." She snorted, crossing her arms. "You really have no room for anything but business in your life, do you?" Marcus looked at her sideways. "What else should I have?" Lucia hesitated before answering. "Normal people marry for love, for desire, for companionship. For you, it's all about contracts and advantages." Marcus let out a dry laugh. "Love is a distraction. I've seen enough to know that it's not worth it." Lucia frowned. "Has anyone ever broken your heart?" He looked at her for a moment but then looked away. "Don't be naive. Hearts don't break. People just make mistakes by trusting too much." Lucia realized that there was no point in insisting. When they arrived at Marcus's house, he opened the door and beckoned her in. The place was a contrast to the life Lucia knew. Cold marble, expensive furniture, nothing there seemed welcoming. "Your room is at the end of the corridor," he said. "A separate room?" She arched an eyebrow. "That's not part of the contract. No one needs to know how we sleep." Lucia nodded. "That's great. Not that I'd want to share a room with you." Marcus smiled. "I'm glad we agreed on something." Lucia went up the stairs and into her room. When she closed the door, she let out a long sigh. From that moment on, she was officially the wife of a man who didn't believe in love. And that shouldn't be a problem. Except for the fact that, with every glance she exchanged, she felt like she might be making the biggest mistake of her life. The first days of the wedding were a strange dance between formality and distance. Lucia and Marcus followed their routines, avoiding seeing each other any more than necessary. But as much as they tried to keep everything professional, small moments broke down this invisible barrier. That morning, Lucia went downstairs and found Marcus in the kitchen, something she hadn't expected. "Do you cook?" she asked, surprised to see him pouring coffee into a cup. He looked up at her, emotionless. "I know how to use a coffee maker." Lucia crossed her arms. "That's impressive, and I thought millionaires only knew how to order other people around." "I do when I need to," he said, picking up a second cup and placing it in front of her. "But sometimes I like to do things my way." She accepted the cup hesitantly. "Thank you." There was silence for a moment, and Lucia realized that this was the first time they had been together without having to pretend to others. "So," she began, Does your grandfather seem satisfied with our marriage? Marcus took a sip of his coffee before answering. He's watching, he always does, but for now he seems to believe. Lucia nodded, blowing on the hot liquid before drinking it. And what happens when he realizes that we're not a real couple? Marcus didn't look away. He won't notice. You're doing well. Lucia felt an unexpected warmth at those words. Was that a compliment? He smiled slightly. Don't get used to it. She laughed softly. You're really bad at complimenting people. Marcus shrugged. I suck at a lot of things. Lucia sensed that there was something else behind that sentence. Before she could ask, the doorbell rang. Marcus got up and walked to the door. When he opened it, an elegant woman walked in, uninvited, her eyes scanning everything around her before landing on Lucia. So it's you, the woman said, her lips curving into a cynical smile. Lucia frowned. Excuse me, but who are you? The woman looked at Marcus. Aren't you going to introduce me? Marcus sighed. Lucia, this is Caroline, my ex-fiancée. Lucia felt a shiver run down her spine. Caroline smiled as if amused by the situation. That's interesting. I never imagined you'd get married so quickly, Marcus. He kept his expression closed. What do you want, Caroline? I've just come to see if it's true. Your marriage, is it real? Lucia felt the weight of the woman's gaze on her, and in that instant, she realized that the game she was playing had just become much more dangerous. Caroline's sharp gaze made Lucia feel uncomfortable. The woman had been there for less than a minute, but her presence already seemed like a threat. Of course it's real, Lucia replied before Marcus could say anything. Caroline arched an eyebrow, crossing her arms. That's funny, because I never imagined Marcus as a man who would marry for love. Lucia opened her mouth to reply, but Marcus was quicker. People change. Caroline let out a short laugh. You? Change? That's a good one. Marcus kept his expression impassive. If you've come all this way expecting me to prove something, you're wasting your time. Lucia and I are happily married. His ex-fiancée looked at Lucia, a debauched smile on her lips. And what about you? Are you really happy, darling? Lucia held her gaze. Very happy. As much as it was just a reflex to keep the lie alive, the answer came out firmly, and that surprised even her. Caroline looked at her for a few more seconds before turning to Marcus. I hope you found what you were looking for. She picked up her bag from the sofa and walked to the door. Oh, and Marcus, Caroline turned to him, you can fool your family, but you can't fool yourself forever. Having said that, he left without waiting for an answer. Silence filled the room. Lucia felt the weight of that visit and for the first time realized that she knew very little about Marcus. So, she broke the silence. Your ex-fiancée. Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. You have nothing to know about her. Lucia crossed her arms. She seemed very interested in our relationship. Caroline has always liked control, he replied without emotion. But it's not something you need to worry about. Lucia looked at him for a moment. If you say so. Marcus looked her straight in the eye. What about you? Are you worried? Lucia felt her breath catch for a second. Of course not. It's none of my business. He nodded slowly, as if evaluating the answer. Good. Lucia felt her heart race. The way Marcus looked at her made her feel that something was different between them. I have to go out, he said, reaching for his jacket. She just nodded, not understanding exactly what he was feeling. When the door closed behind him, Lucia realized that Caroline's presence had planted a seed of doubt. What would happen if she found out the truth? And worse, what would happen if she herself began to wish it were real? Lucia tried to convince herself that Caroline's visit hadn't affected her, but the truth was that a restlessness had settled inside her. What else was Marcus hiding? Why did that woman seem so convinced that he wasn't capable of love? That evening, Marcus took longer than usual to return. Lucia was in the kitchen drinking tea when she heard the front door open. She got up and went into the living room to find Marcus loosening his tie. He looked tired, but his closed expression indicated that there was something else on his mind. "You took your time," she commented, without thinking much about it. Marcus looked up at her. "I didn't know we had a curfew." Lucia snorted. "We don't. I was just surprised." He threw his tie on the sofa and poured himself a shot of whiskey at the bar. It had been a long day. Lucia watched him for a moment before approaching. Was it because of Caroline? Marcus stopped with the glass halfway to his mouth. "What about her?" Lucia crossed her arms. "You've changed since she showed up. Don't tell me it hasn't affected you." He let out a dry laugh. "Are you trying to analyze my feelings now?" "No. I'm just trying to understand who the man I married is." Marcus stared at her for a few seconds before sighing and sitting down on the sofa. "Caroline and I were going to get married, but I called it off." Lucia arched an eyebrow. "You broke up with her?" "Yes, and she never accepted it." Lucia bit her lip thoughtfully. "Why?" Marcus swirled the liquid in his glass before answering. "Because I realized that she was more interested in my name and my money than in me." Lucia blinked, surprised at his sincerity. "That explains a lot." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Does it? It explains why you don't believe in love." He didn't answer immediately. He just stared at the glass before taking a sip. "Love is a convenient illusion." Lucia felt a tightness in her chest. "Not everyone is like Caroline." Marcus stood up and walked over to her. "What about you, Lucia? Do you believe in love?" She held her breath. But the words disappeared when she realized how close the two of them were. Marcus's intense gaze held her in place. "You don't have to answer," he murmured. Lucia felt her heart race. She knew she should walk away, remember that this was just a contract. But at that moment, everything seemed less simple, and for the first time, she didn't know if she was pretending or just feeling. Lucia spent the day trying to forget what had happened the night before. The look in Marcus's eyes, the closeness, the way his voice seemed softer than ever. But the memory wouldn't leave her alone. It was just a contract. It was only supposed to be a contract. When she went down to the living room that afternoon, she found Marcus talking on the phone. He was pacing back and forth, his jaw tense. "I don't care what he said," Marcus said coolly. "This merger has to happen." Lucia realized that she had never seen him like this. In the workplace, he was someone completely different. As soon as she ended the call, Marcus noticed her. "Is something wrong?" She shook her head. "I just wanted to know if there are any events I need to go to with you." He sighed and wiped his hand across his face. "Yes, a gala dinner tonight. My grandfather will be there." Lucia nodded. "Then I should get ready." "Yes." Her short, direct answer seemed to irritate him. "Lucia." She stopped and turned to him. "What?" Marcus hesitated before speaking. "About yesterday." Lucia took a deep breath. "We don't need to talk about that." He looked at her for a few seconds before nodding. "Okay," but they both knew it wasn't that simple. Later, at the event, Lucia felt all eyes on her. She looked stunning in the long dress Marcus had chosen. He seemed pleased with the choice, but avoided showing anything more than necessary. When they arrived, Marcus's grandfather greeted them. "I see you're still doing well." Lucia smiled, trying to keep the charade intact. "Of course, we're closer than ever." The old man gave Marcus a curious look. "Is that true?" Marcus took Lucia's hand and entwined his fingers in hers. "Yes, it is." Lucia felt a shiver run through her body, not because of the gesture itself, but because of the way it seemed natural. Later, when they had been alone for a moment, Marcus finally broke the silence. "You said we were closer than ever." Lucia stared into a glass of champagne. "That's what people want to hear." He tilted his head, watching her. "But is it true?" Lucia felt her breath catch. "What do you think?" Marcus held her chin gently, forcing her to face him. "I think this contract is getting harder and harder to keep on paper." Lucia felt her heart race, and she realized that deep down, he was right. The morning after dinner, Lucia woke up earlier than usual. She got up quietly, put on a light robe, and went downstairs to the kitchen, where the smell of fresh coffee surprised her. Marcus was already there, dressed casually, reading something on his tablet. "Do you even get up early on Sundays?" she asked, her voice still sleepy. He looked up, a discreet smile forming. "Habit." Lucia poured herself a cup and sat down opposite him. The silence between them was comfortable now, unlike at the beginning. "I did a lot of thinking yesterday," she said, staring at the dark liquid in the cup. Marcus put down his tablet. "About what?" She hesitated before answering. "About all this. The contract," Lucia nodded. "And about what lies beyond it." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "I thought we agreed to keep it professional." She looked him in the eye. "We tried, but something changed." Marcus was silent for a few seconds. I know. And what are we going to do with that?" she asked. He took a deep breath. "I don't know, Lucia. It was never part of the plan. I've spent my life running away from any kind of bond." She smiled sadly. "And I've spent my life dreaming of something like this, even if I thought I'd never have it." Marcus got up, walked over to the window and stood there for a few seconds before speaking. "When I met you, I only saw a temporary solution to a problem. But now—" Lucia waited, her heart racing. "Now," she whispered, "now you've become the only part of my life that seems real." She stood up slowly and walked over to him. "So why are you so scared?" He turned to her. "Because I've fallen in love with you." Lucia felt a lump in her throat. "And I with you." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the wind outside. Then Marcus gently held her face between his hands. "We can rewrite our contract, this time without clauses, no deadline." Lucia smiled, her eyes watering. "Only with love." He kissed her, now without photographers, without witnesses, without pretense. It was the kiss of two strangers who had become accomplices, and who now chose to remain together, without the need for any signed papers.